Hello and welcome back to The Swinging Christies, the podcast about Agatha Christie in the swinging 60s. I'm Dr. Mark Aldridge. I'm an associate professor and I've written a lot about Agatha Christie, including my brand new book, Agatha Christie's Marple Expert on Wickedness, which you can order now.
Yes, and do. And I'm Great Robert Brown, and I'm a writer and a Christie fan. And today, a mirror, because we're reflecting. Today we are mirrors.
We are.
We're looking back, aren't we, on a lovely series so far, responding to some lovely listener feedback.
Yes.
And just having a nice chinwag about everything that we've done so far and everything that we're going to go on to do in the project. It's very exciting. It's nice to be back at the mic, isn't it?
It is, yeah, because
it's been a while.
We are legally obliged now to only converse with each other when there's a microphone in the room.
Absolutely, yes.
Thanks to our billionaire backer
we
who
have
is insisting.
When did we last record? It's been a while, hasn't it?
I don't know. When did we last record? We should go back and listen because we always say at the end what the date is. I think it was
April?
I was going to say March, but maybe March or April. But we're now into July, well into July.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been a while, but it's gone quickly.
And I should say, so we were referring to this as kind of a retrospective, and then Mark was like, oh, we should call it Reflections after your favourite Supremes
one of my
song.
Yeah.
We can't afford to pay the estate of Diana Ross.
She's alive! It's not her estate!
Is she?
Of course she is. She's still going. She did Glastonbury like 2 years ago. She's still on tour.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Diana.
God, that's my chance for a free ticket gone. Thanks, Gray.
No, they'll invite you. They just won't invite me. Oh, that's hilarious. I thought she'd... Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, I was about to say I'm a big fan, but clearly not if I don't even know that. No, but we were talking about this, weren't we? Because your favourite song is Reflections.
Well, no, it's my second favourite.
Oh, what's your favourite?
My actual favourite is You Keep Me Hanging On.
Oh, see, I'm not as keen. I think I was trying to remember yesterday, wasn't I? I said The Happening, which is up there.
Which is amazing.
I think maybe You Can't Hurry Love.
That is
also
amazing.
Up there. What I was going to say is that we cannot quote lyrics or sing it because we can't afford that level of.
Famously, Diana Ross is one of our big listeners, and she'll know right away.
I'm surprised to hear that she's a big listener of ours, but then I was surprised to hear she's still around.
Do we want to redo any of that? So how have you been, Greg?
Very good, very good. I'm shoulder deep in a new play.
From which direction do you start at the top and move down?
Oh, I go in head first.
Oh, okay.
I dive in head first to my plays.
Right.
Thank you very much. To my writing, I take it very seriously, Mark. How have you been? What have you been up to?
Oh, yeah. Busy, just finished obviously academic year. Quite a busy summer actually, because there's quite a few Agatha Christie projects which I can't talk about, which I'm doing a bit of consultancy work for.
Busy signing NDAs is what you mean.
Busy signing NDAs.
Busy signing NDAs.
And busy, and excited about where they're going. But I tell you what I did do that really made me think about the podcast and also our listeners was a week or two ago, went to see the show It's a Mystery by Tim Benzie, who does Solve Along a Murder, She Wrote, which I've been to when it was at Torquay, and it's amazing. And I've said several times to you that we must go because it's very us.
Yes.
It's got that thing of being... Well, I hope it's very us because it's really fun, but like the research is there as well. Like there's a way to do that. For Solve Along a Murder, She Wrote, those of you who don't know it, basically Tim Benzie, brilliant, funny, bright guy, comes out and he plays a Murder, She Wrote episode and pauses it every now and again and gives you a bit of background and talks about some clues, and all the way through you try and work out who you think might have done it. So you've got things to hold up and all sorts. But there's a way to do that would just be, oh, who cares, do a vote, here's a rude joke and move on. But he's like done the research. It's a great show. So I knew this would be, because this is him reflecting on the significance of crime fiction in his life from being a child with a huge emphasis on Agatha Christie. And I'm actually not going to say much more about it because it's a very personal show, very funny, really, really good. And he's going to be performing at the Edinburgh Fringe, and I'm sure we'll be touring it after that as well. So I would strongly recommend, if and when that comes anywhere near you, that you make a beeline for it. So that was great. I really enjoyed that. That's something
fantastic.
I'd like to flag
out. Oh yeah, I'll check it out. So what a series, what an experience so far. So this is actually our 11th episode and counting. So we did I'm assuming if you're listening to this, then you're not just jumping on randomly at reflections, are you? But so we dropped our intro episode, and then we did 9 themed episodes, kind of tracking ideas that were in the ether in the 1960s and mapping those onto all of Christie's 60s works. And yes, now we're putting a bow on that and then looking forward to the future. And do you have a highlight? Do you have a particular, what's your favourite thing to come of the project so far, Mark?
Actually, my highlight has been doing it. Actually, sitting with my friend in a room and talking about a subject that we both love and that we both got so much to say about. And yeah, so that's a bit that I've really enjoyed.
Yeah. Do you know, I was thinking the other day, I hope I'm right in saying this, I don't think we have once mentioned her disappearance, Agatha Christie's disappearance.
Yeah.
I think in terms of what we've done, in terms of contributing to the idea that Christie is not just those headline bullet points that people say she is, you know, the golden age, the disappearance, Roger Ackroyd pushed the Second World War, and that's it. I think the fact that we've really been championing the underdog and that people have responded to that, haven't they? People have been like, oh, I'm so glad you've highlighted this book to me because I'd never read that one before because I just heard the later ones were rubbish. Or, you know, people recently picking up even The Rats and The Patient and Afternoon at the Seaside.
Which really are forgotten and really are not discussed.
And wrongly so. The fact that I'm so proud that we've championed those. We were in the Radio Times.
That was a surprise.
It was a surprise. Thank you to David, who we didn't know before. No. And
but we followed sort of afterwards.
But he did take that 20 quid very gamely. That is
how many people are we going to get sacked over the course of this series?
How many people are we going to bribe to get ahead? No, I mean, that was so lovely to be featured as one of the top things to read, watch, listen to that week.
Yeah.
In our opening.
It was really only been early
launched, on. 3 weeks or so. It was early days, wasn't it?
We've just ambled along doing our thing, hoping. And so that was so lovely to see that. Really
kind. And I want to pull out as well Celeste Chance, who's a booktuber, who shouted us out back in February. And she described our podcast as lively, uplifting, fun, effervescent conversations about sex, drugs, and rock and roll and the culture of the 60s and how things were changing. I mean, that's just exactly what we wanted to do, isn't it? And also hilarious because...
that's her saying gay.
Yeah. Celeste, in case you're wondering, yes, we are both gay. But yeah, the feedback's been incredible. Everyone's been so supportive and so lovely, and also, has asked for clarification or corrected us when we've needed that as well. It's been a conversation, which is what we wanted.
Tony Medower, I'll give a particularly big shout out to, who has a long history with Agatha Christie. He wrote the intros for While the Light Lasts, which is one of those posthumous collections in the 90s.
Yeah.
And so to explain what things like Manx Gold are all about, because they're a bit weird out of context. So a big name in the Agatha Christie community, but he called me up to congratulate us both, which was really lovely.
That's so nice.
And indeed sent me a text the other day to say, to congratulate us on when we'd reached our fame episode, and said we were coming into this. So thank you, Tony. Those sorts of things have real value for both of us, I think, because we want it to be fun, but we also want different people to get something out of it.
Of course. And also, it's funny, you were saying yesterday about how we would have been quite happy just to sort of bumble along and get, a couple of hundred listens and just sort of we were doing it ultimately we've done it for the love of it and because we're fascinated by it and because we wanted to hang out and we wanted to make something rigorous but also entertaining. The fact that people are being lovely about it and turning up in their tens of thousands is that's bloody great cherry on the sundae, isn't it?
Yes.
So what's next for us, Mark? What's the future of the podcast? Tease us.
Well, still hoping for that billionaire backer to come in. Because that was the thing. We never even thought about sponsorship or anything like that. We've just fumbled along and done.
But
what we
people have said to me
liked,
and I was like, no, because it's not about.
and which studio do we record in? I've had that several times.
The studio of Mark's office. That's the studio.
Mark's back bedroom.
I'm looking at his Spice Girls Lego as we speak.
Yeah. So next, we've got so many bonus episodes that we have either recorded or are about to record,
and different types of bonus episodes as well. Like there's a little bit of location, dare I say? There's a little bit of theme. So coming up, we've got a Halloween special and a Christmas special.
Yes.
So seasonal as well. We're going to be seasonal.
And it's worth saying we'd saved that. So we thought quite a while ago, didn't we? That we were like, maybe we'll just put that to one side and see where we come to.
Quite a few times, bits specifically of Adventure of the Christmas Pudding and Halloween Party. Like when we were doing horror, I remember sort of going, oh yeah, we'll park that point. That's an interesting little chat, but we'll park that. So yeah, lots of cool things to come in those.
But we've also got other things. Swinging Christies is moving outside the microphone, beyond the mic, from behind the microphone into the real world. We've said before, I think, that we're speaking at the International Agatha Christie Festival in Torquay in September. Well, it's sold out.
It has.
It's sold out really quickly.
And you said fringe events as well.
That's we're even before the day before the main festival kicks off.
Well, I like to think we're the grand opening ceremony, like the Olympics. You know, when they had all the nurses and then like someone reading from the Tempest.
We have to do a little dance.
That's us in the stadium.
Agatha's waltz.
Yeah. So we've got 6 more gems that we didn't have time to fit into the Swinging Christie so far, which we're talking about on the 11th.
So there were a few things, especially that we thought, this could be quite visual. So a couple of those are ones that we thought might work particularly nicely as a little tour.
Yes, and then the day after, you're
with Kemper from All About Agatha, joining him on his panel.
Yes,
on the
and you're talking about
adaptations, favourite adaptations, best adaptations.
Very cool.
So that'll be interesting.
Do you know a couple of things about the adaptations? I can't remember.
Someone should write a book, and then I could pass it off as my own work.
Zing!
Imagine if it's like there's another Mark Aldridge who writes about Agatha Christie.
There is. There's a
MJ Arledge.
MJ Arledge.
You thought for years was me before we met.
I thought for years I was like, oh, he's another one of those Christie people that moonlights as a thriller writer. I did. I always thought has anyone ever seen MJ Arledge and Mark Aldridge in the same room?
Well, I don't know because I don't know what he looks like. So
Google him.
Oh my god. Well, he's just book covers so far.
I wonder if we should follow him on Twitter or something.
Serious.
Well, of course, he writes thrillers.
That's true.
That's true. I can see. MJ, if you're listening, get in touch. Be lovely to connect with you, as you are, in fact, practically a member of the Swinging Christie's family.
Also on the Friday at lunchtime, there is a book club which we are running, where what have we chosen to talk about, Gray?
Well, of course, we're doing a Swinging Christie.
Yes.
We're talking about the Mirror Crack from Side to Side, which is, depending on the day you ask us, our favourite, maybe.
But the point is that people need to sign up for it, and we'll let people know about 2 weeks in advance.
Yes, and it's free. And it'd be lovely to see as many of you there as can make it down in Torquay. It'd be super fun. And it'd be nice just to have a bit of a natter with a group of Mirror Cracked fans.
Yeah,
Mirror Reflections.
Oh, yes. And there are other events
Themes
going on at lunchtime as well, but not with us. So if people want to do, there's a Cluedo Championship, which...
Are you saying people should go to another event instead of ours?
No, they're on different days.
Advertising events that clash with ours.
Then I've got my talk when I'm speaking about...
Yes.
Joan Hickson mostly, but basically in the 1980s, the search for the definitive Miss Marple. So a bit of Helen Hayes, a bit of Angela Lansbury. I've literally just written it this week. So
how
I wrote
exciting.
it, and I've got some really nice clips and stuff.
And bits of this is drawing on, obviously, what you've just uncovered as part of the research for your Marple book.
Absolutely, yeah. All About Agatha in my talks, they keep adding tickets, but I think they are very near the end because we're in the Spanish barn where I think they can keep squeezing extra seats in.
Sure.
But for us, when we're giving our talk, it's in a venue where there's only so much space.
We're in the boathouse, aren't we? Which is exciting, like on the docks or something.
It's not the boat. It's the because it's the sailing club. It's the sailing club.
Yes. And famously, I can't swim.
Yeah.
So if something goes horribly wrong, this might be the last thing you ever hear of me, actually, dear listener. This might be it.
As I'm like, I can teach you to swim.
No, you'll be like,
I know how.
You'll be like, you see that rock out there, little Graham? You see that rock far out there? Why don't you see if you can swim to that? It's not that far. Oh, and the other thing, which has actually already happened, but we both appeared on another podcast talking about swinging Christies, Tea and Murder with the lovely Rebecca, and you discussed at Bertram's Hotel.
Yes.
And I chose The Clocks.
Yes.
And both of those episodes are available now. And yes, worth a listen. I remember thinking there are things about The Clocks that I won't say in our Armageddon episode, so I keep my powder dry for them for Tea and Murder. So lots of lovely little exclusives in there as well.
And I think both of us, when we listened to each other's episodes when it went out, we both went, oh, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
For different things that we'd never discussed.
Yeah. But this is the joy of it, isn't it? Is that it doesn't matter how many times you return to these books, you always think of something new that you've never thought of before. Or somebody else always has a take on one of these Christies that you've just never thought of. That's what keeps us going, I guess.
So, Gray, do you have a favourite episode of ours?
Mark, you can't ask that. It's like picking between your children. You mustn't. It's unethical.
No, I've got a favourite.
Yeah.
I'm fine. It's the ethics of that is
Little Jimmy.
It's definitely Little Jimmy. I'm very fond of our horror episodes. And I loved our Fame episode, but we were a bit giddy at that point as well.
Fame was the most fun to record,
definitely,
for sure.
Yeah.
Do you know, I genuinely found each topic interesting in and of itself to research. And I think the ones that we thought we wouldn't have as much to say, we ended up uncovering loads. I think for me, if I had to pick a favourite, if you're really going to force me... you're just
sat there to say anyway,
quite peacefully, and I'm just monologuing. But no, I think I'd say rock and roll, because I think that was the point at which I went. We've joked on the podcast before about how episode 1, it was surprising how hard it was to record episode 1, how new it all was to us doing episode 1, how much work it was. I think recording episode 2 was the first time I went, oh, this is fun. Like, this is cool. We can have these clips. I just sort of went, okay, I can see a way forward now. So that's got a special place in my heart.
I'm very fond of one that hasn't come yet, actually. But we can, that might be my favourite, but I'm not going to say what it is.
Obviously, since recording them, though, there have been a few moments where we've gone, oh, I wish I'd said that, or, oh, I've just discovered this, and if only we'd known that when we recorded XYZ. So yeah, this is just a section to allow us the moment to kind of give our own clarifications and add-ons. The first one of which I want to say is I know nobody's replied saying this, but I wanted to correct myself. You know the one-liner for The Pale Horse?
Yes.
The Pale Horse is a standalone novel that explores mysterious goings-on and unexplained deaths at a countryside inn from 1961. But of course, it isn't a countryside inn, is it?
Not anymore.
It's no longer an inn.
No.
It's now
Well, it's a house, isn't it? It's just a home.
They just live there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've just got it up, actually. So Mark Easterbrook says, isn't there another pub round here? The Pale Horse, didn't you say? And Rhoda says, the Pale Horse isn't a pub. I mean, not now. It was an old inn, said Despard. Mostly 16th century, I'd say, but it's just an ordinary house now. But yeah, isn't it funny? I was convinced that someone would get in touch and say that, but nobody has. Yeah. And then there are other things that we didn't think anyone would notice that they've replied to. So yes, that's my clarification.
And something came up just this morning on our walk when we were chatting about, because there was this Charlie Watts auction. Charlie Watts, the drummer of the Rolling Stones.
And I said, why the hell didn't you say this in the rock and roll episode?
And I said, I don't know why.
But I'll say it later on mic.
But I will say it later on mic. So
tell us.
Well, all it is really is that when Charlie Watts died, lots of his possessions were sent to auction, and it transpires that he was a huge collector of Agatha Christie alongside various other things.
Wow.
And we're not talking about a few Fontana paperbacks here. We're talking about like items that people have not seen elsewhere because the dust jackets and everything. Loads of them were the books that Christie inscribed to Carlo Fisher, her assistant secretary, etc.
Yes, yeah.
They are all extremely valuable and as rare as you can get, really. So there you go, a Rolling Stone had an interest
Which
in
is,
Agatha
again,
Christie.
it's like, because that's the cooler than cool in our kind of 60s terms. And then there's Christie, which, as we've said throughout the podcast, is sometimes derided as, and yet, those two worlds marry. It's like when we talked about, which I know a lot of people love, talking about the collision of the world of Joe Orton and mad radical defacing with Christie, or when we bring up Dua Lipa or Dolly Parton. It's just not worlds that you would expect to collide, but how fascinating that they did.
If you want to know all the details, Collecting Christie has done a 2-part whole list of everything. That was worth saying. And you were saying about how you thought someone was going to bring up the pale horse thing. And I thought someone was going to bring up another thing, which they did, which was
The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side.
The Mirror Cracks from Side to Side is a Miss Marple novel about a poisoning at a film star's house. It's from 1962. As soon as we'd finished doing the Fame episode, I thought, I should have mentioned that Marina Gregg, who we said might be influenced by various
we
people.
sort of spent a bit of time talking about the ways in which you might, as a contemporary reader, have compared her in your head to aspects of Elizabeth Taylor or Marilyn and Arthur Miller I was talking about in terms of her and Jason Rudd.
Yes.
And you said...
Well, this whole story about Gene Tierney, who's a big star in America, is the fact that Gene Tierney was affected in exactly the same way, a very similar way to how Marina Gregg was, which means that she met a fan while she was pregnant, and she then had German measles, and that hugely affected the development of the baby.
Yes.
So that's exactly what happens to Marina Gregg.
That's the kind of solution to the whole...
Yeah, that's...
But Christie, am I right in saying, contested that was the inspiration?
Absolutely.
But it is very close.
It is very similar, but there's a letter from... So an American fan writes to Agatha Christie basically telling her off to say, you've done the thing that Heather Babcock is criticised for in the book, of being really insensitive, and you've been just as insensitive in the way that you treated this story because it's so clearly Gene Tierney. Edmund Cork replied to this fan, and I've quoted from it in the Marple book if you want to wait for that. But basically he says, you may not believe this, but it's genuinely a coincidence, and Mrs. Christie was not aware of it. And in fact, the dangers of German measles in pregnant women is most well known in this country because of an incident concerning the Dutch royal family. So that had been publicised much more than Gene Tierney. I'm convinced by that, partly because I actually don't think that Christie would have worried about saying that she was influenced, because things like Murder on the Orient Express are very clearly influenced by quite distressing true life tales. So I'm inclined to believe that there doesn't seem to have been much British press coverage of Gene Tierney.
No, but also sometimes I have it where something lodges in your brain and you might then be completely surprised by somebody showing it back to you.
Yes.
But actually it could have influenced her without her realising, perhaps.
Yeah. It's possible. And I heard someone else say on another podcast, I'm sorry, I can't remember which, but that it might well be, whilst associating with movie stars and stuff, that it might be a story that's better known in Hollywood or stuff, and that might have disappeared from that. So it's not impossible. It seems unusual to have explicitly denied it and drawn attention to another case.
Yeah.
But yes.
Interesting. I've got to say, actually, talking about favourite episodes, I was really proud of the Empire episode because we had so much really encouraging, positive feedback from what was a very sensitive topic and that we approached with a lot of sensitivity. In particular, the thing that bowled me over a bit, because I admire her so much, was Subhadra Das, who has written the excellent book Uncivilized, which is 10 Lies That Made the West. She responded to our Empire episode saying, I'm going to quote it actually, she said, #lessons in label writing, or more accurately, podcasting. I'm a big fan of this show, and this episode is proof that your enthusiasm for a subject can be enriched by tackling tough subjects head on. More, please. Which I was just so touched by. Yeah. But I also wanted to say, because I talked a lot on that episode, alongside Subhadra's excellent book, there's Sathnam Sanghera's Empire World most recently, and also Empire Land, and also Stolen History for younger readers. All brilliant resources around this topic. And something that Sathnam said in Empire World, I actually reread it after we did the Empire episode, because I remember reading it when we recorded it back in March or whenever it was. And something he said, it really stayed with me. He has this kind of beautiful passage where he traces just tiny little everyday things back through history, almost always ending up imperial. And it made me think, you know, every time they drink tea in a 1960s Christie, that's empire. Every time they have sugar in their tea, that's empire. Every time they sit at a mahogany table, that's empire. You know, it's such an expansive topic that we just didn't have time to kind of cover off you couldn't even completely catalogue every mention, because everything around us and everything around all of those characters in all of those books you can really trace back. And I think that's just important to remember, and wanted to sort of make that point again. We also had, staying with the Empire episode, we had a message from a listener who pointed out that what's going on with Israel and Palestine at the moment fundamentally has its roots in the British Empire, and wanting us to acknowledge that as well.
I had something in the rock and roll episode that I mentioned that
yes.
Afterwards, even while we were recording it, I thought, shall I try and find it? I was like, no, this could take hours, because I'd mentioned this thing in the Joan Hickson adaptation of They Do It With Mirrors, where I say about that in the script there was a mention of Elvis that they cut and then they didn't use in the final episode. And I sort of had to reproduce it from memory, and I was like, I wish I could have quoted from it directly. So I have now, in the time, got
brilliant.
it out. So this is how it would have played out.
Treat us.
This is the common room at Stonygate, the school in Stonygate. Ernie and Neville are jiving. The music is Heartbreak Hotel. An incongruous figure stands unnoticed in the doorway. Miss Marple watches them dancing to Elvis. She's very interested.
Ooh.
The two lads notice Miss Marple and quickly stop the record. Neville then says, "Oh," and Miss Marple says, "Good morning." So just a tiny little moment, but it situates it in that period so specifically.
But what your script leaves out is the fact that they then put the record back on and she joins in, no?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And then she regenerates into Margaret Rutherford and she ends up doing the twist.
I was going to say, if it were Margaret Rutherford, she would have joined in. Yeah, absolutely.
She would have started it off. They would have joined in with her.
It's true, it's true. We found this amazing document. So this is answers to questions asked by Mondadori. I apologise to any Italians if I'm butchering that pronunciation, who were her Italian publishers. So we only have the answers, and they're numbered in this typed out document, and then there are some pen annotations to the answers as well. And this is in the run-up to the release of Passeggero per Francoforte.
I don't think your apology is sufficient.
Passenger to Frankfurt. Passenger to Frankfurt is the Italian edition. Passenger to Frankfurt is a standalone espionage thriller about Sir Stafford Nye's hunt for answers from 1970.
And there's a few ways that Christie talks about her influences and what her rationale is really for some of it. So firstly, she says how the political characters are not based on any particular personages. One has a rough idea in one's mind of a gallery of political personalities. So that's interesting. She's not saying, oh, this person's definitely like that. She then talks about Great Aunt Matilda, who is a character that I really enjoyed in the book because I felt that I could detect maybe some Agatha Christie there. But she says, I should say, it was not at all like me. Consider myself scolded. I've never been an autocratic personality. She also talks generally about things like the moral message and the morality that we see, and says that anyone can be influenced by evil. So I think that's a really big theme. Well, it is a big theme of Passenger to Frankfurt, isn't it? That people can be brainwashed, manipulated, moved by these great leaders.
Well, good and evil.
Good and evil.
Benevolence.
Absolutely, yeah. She's also asked about if she were going to live on a desert island. She'd take a singer, not a pop singer. A lover of folk songs or a musician.
So did she ever do Desert Island Discs?
She didn't do Desert Island Discs.
Oh, that's such a shame.
Yeah, she did do a similar show for local radio, picking some of her favourite songs, but no, not Desert Island Discs.
Oh, well, this is her Desert Island Discs.
Yeah.
There you go.
If I could make a choice of someone whom you've not offered me, she's like a witty barrister who's always a good conversationalist. She wants to take basically the cast of witness to the prosecution with her.
In the spirit of reflections, we get a nice bit of insight, actually. She says, I cannot say that I have ever reflected on whether I regret anything in life or not. Probably there are hundreds of things I regret. As one cannot go back and do anything about them, it is not worthwhile thinking about them. There was a charming play by Lord Dunsany, I think, called If, where a man bitterly regretted the fact that once he had not managed to catch a train, he was allowed to go back and catch the train and lived his life through again and came to terrible grief through doing so. And then she quotes, "The fate of every man have we hung about his neck." So yes, we catch Christie in reflective mood, appropriately enough.
Nice.
We had a good laugh and a good discussion, though, about the last question.
Which just says, last question, leave it to statistics to answer this. 3 exclamation marks.
It's the 3 exclamation marks, isn't it? I think we were saying, do we think it's like, will this be your biggest book yet?
Oh, maybe. Yes, that's
Maybe,
a good, yeah.
Will this be the biggest selling book yet? Or
because
something?
if that's the last question, you think it would be something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense, especially because Passenger to Frankfurt being her 80th birthday book. And,
yes, it was much hyped.
Well, I wanted about, if it had been earlier in the questions, I wanted if it might have been about population explosion or something when they're writing about the state of the world.
Yeah.
But to have it right at the end after asking about desert island discs and
Yeah,
stuff, or desert island preferences.
Do you know what it is? It's the stats. It's how many milligrams of Benvo to take. How many milligrams is a safe dosage of Benvo? What's this?
Well, I was going to say, yes. What is this? This. Oh, he's got a prop. The little smile on his face when he's got a prop.
The mailbag.
Oh, it's a big one. How much have we got to discuss?
I feel like I'm on Blue Peter.
Yeah.
We've had so many lovely messages.
Oh.
I'm going to rummage for them now.
Yes.
You can tell I started out on radio drama, can't you?
Can absolutely tell.
Do you think that's enough?
I think
Foley
that's enough.
now. Yeah, so if you hadn't worked out from that, we're looking at some listener feedback and some responses, some clarifications. Judith Rhodes. Hi, Judith.
Hello.
To
the exclamation, I'm like, I think I'm Judith.
Yeah, you're overexcited, aren't you?
Oh my God.
You're overheating.
I am
aren't you, sweetie?
overheating.
Here you go. Let's waft the door.
Thank you.
So, Judith Rhodes. Hi, Judith.
Hello, Judith.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
She got in touch to say you were talking about the so-called Americanization of our language, and one of the words you cited was sweater. Do you remember this? She said, I've definitely used this all my life. She was brought up in the North Midlands, she tells us, and she says, however, my mother always thought that was a bit slangy and preferred me to say jumper or pullover. She also said, I enjoy the podcast very much, by the way. And we had a bit of back and forth about the origin of the word. And we were talking about the loose knits postcards, which she actually sent us a couple of pictures of dating back to the 60s. So we'll share those on our...
Are those like knitting patterns?
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But yeah, thanks for listening, Judith.
Thank you, Judith. Oh, do I get to pick?
Go on.
It's, oh
Reach
my
in.
goodness. I'm going to have to...
It's like Secret Santa,
It
isn't it?
is like Secret Santa. Well, this is an interesting one because this is one of those areas that we keep coming back to, the development. Thank you, Helen Abelman, who emailed us about this. Hello, Helen.
Hi, Helen.
Because we discussed about the development having possibly a dual meaning in the mirror cracked from side to side this
Yes.
is. Everybody must know by this point because we discussed the development so much.
Yes, well, I think because we talked about Development Murder being an early title,
Yeah.
and I was saying that I actually think that's quite a pulpy title in terms of, it's like Destination Murder or Destination Unknown or, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Helen goes one step further.
Yeah, because she talks about Marina Gregg's motive for murder is, of course, about the development of her baby.
Yeah.
Saying that actually that's another meaning as well. And whether this is conscious or unconscious, certainly it's a word that there are so many different connotations to.
Yeah. It's making me think maybe Development Murder should have been the title. Maybe it's a better title.
It's interesting, isn't it, that there are different ways, because it's such a classical title, The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side. It's not a very 60s title, whereas the Development Murder really would have been. Okay, there must be more.
Oh, there's
Your turn.
There's so many more. Sarah O'Kane. Hi, Sarah.
Hello, Sarah.
She got in touch this week, actually, saying, I find it interesting that 3 of the most fashionable and popular actors of the day played the lead roles in the Endless Night film, which we talked about in our horror episode. Britt Eklund, Howell Bennett, and Hayley Mills. With Christie in her 80s by the time the film was released, I think it says a lot about her ability to observe the time she lived in and for her writing to speak to contemporary culture. Which, yeah, I mean, it's a good point. We talked about, I don't know if we talked about it on air actually, but we talked about how Bennett was very much like a kind of an it guy at the time.
Yeah. And they've both been in a similar sort of psychological thriller a year or two earlier.
Oh, interesting.
So you often get that with, actors who end up being paired quite often. Definitely. I mean, Sarah's absolutely right that they are so fashionable at this point.
I remember saying at the time, he has very much the look of David Hemmings, who stars in Blow Up, which we compared it to. But yeah, thanks for listening, Sarah, and thanks for getting in touch.
Thank you, Sarah. I saw Hayley Mills in an episode of Murder, She Wrote yesterday.
No way.
Yeah.
Did you solve along with it?
Well, I mean, I always do. I'm by myself in a room, but that's not going to stop me shouting out when I think a clue has been located. Oh, is there a mailbag?
It's Christmas.
Oh, definitely full of real letters.
Happy Christmas, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, how lovely. Okay. Oh, so this is from Brad Friedman. Brad runs a blog called Our Sweet Mystery.
Yes.
So I've sort of known Brad online a bit for many years because I think he reviewed Poirot and stuff. Anyway, I've read his blog for quite some time. So he's someone who's very insightful, really knows his stuff.
And he asked us to contribute to the blog recently. We contributed to his post about which Christie to start with.
Yes.
I think he specifically said, can I dare you both to suggest a 60s one?
Yeah.
And we're not going to say what we said, but head on over to Our Sweet Mystery to check out what we wrote for him on that.
So Brad is one of many listeners, I think, who knows his Christie really well. He mentioned that he has great fondness for a Caribbean mystery, which is something that before I knew anything about Agatha Christie history, a Caribbean mystery always felt to me like one of the big ones. It felt like one that people knew quite a lot. And I don't know if that's just because the location's in the title.
I think it stands out because it's unusual in its in how exotic it sounds. Yeah, I think that is it. But yeah, you're right. It is one that people cite a lot, unlike a lot of the swinging titles, which fly more under the radar.
But Brad does also say, I fear that you could run your show till doomsday and still not make me show any affection for Passenger to Frankfurt. We will take that wager, Brad.
I challenge accepted as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. But interestingly, Brad also picked up on something that we've only mentioned briefly, which is about the script for a film of Bleak House, which Christie worked on in the 60s. We haven't forgotten about it, but it is...
No, in fact, we were deliberately holding it back, weren't we? Yes, so watch out for a bonus episode that delves into...
all that fog.
Yeah.
If you can't wait till then and you want to have a little bit more Bleak House information, I actually wrote an article for a journal last year.
You did, it was very good.
Which was all about Christie writing Bleak House and multiple versions of the script and lots of detail on it. Almost all of which is brand new, and it's something that I'd taken 10 years thinking about writing, and it's slowly worked towards because it's just such a big job. Because of the way journals work at the moment, it's behind a paywall, but it's only embargoed, I think, until August or September. So soonish, we'll put the link up as soon as everyone can read it. We'll put the link up so that anyone who wants to
and we will email it to Brad directly.
And we will email it to Brad directly.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Brad.
Who's next?
Oh, let's see, got. And you've picked out a small one here.
It was just, we had a comment from Alexis on Good Pods, and it was something that I wish we'd mentioned at the time. It's a very good point, which is that the town the BBC series Death in Paradise is set in is actually called Honoré in tribute to Christie's A Caribbean Mystery. And I just thought that's a lovely thing to recognise in terms of the legacy of that book, because it's one of the BBC's biggest dramas. It's huge. The fact that that's still going. But yeah, so it's the fictional island of Sainte Marie, and then the town is called Honoré. But yeah, thanking for listening. Thanks for commenting.
Thank you, Alexis.
You don't have to make a drama out of it every time.
Okay. So one of our followers on Instagram, after listening to the drugs episode, noted that we said that Agatha Christie doesn't use truth drugs or any other sort of fake drugs that can do amazing, marvellous things, but points out that, of course, there is an allusion to a truth drug in A Pocket Full of Rye. So although it doesn't exist...
book from the 50s.
Yeah. So
I'm immediately like, oh, it's from the 50s.
Yeah.
Not interested. Yawn.
And actually, it's revealed that there isn't really.
I like the 50s as well.
There isn't really a truth drug.
So as in, it's a red herring?
Yeah, so someone thinks that there might be a truth drug, but actually that isn't what it is.
No, I think, and the wider point we were making was that Christie doesn't dabble in that kind of
Cheating?
yes.
Which
which is I'm immediately going, how many letters are we going to get after that?
Yeah.
But it's like, but I do think she has integrity, and she does have, although she may bend certain rules, she doesn't really cheat in her mind. And also, what are rules? What's the genre? What are the limits of the genre anyway? I mean, but yeah, that she has a sense of her own, her world's kind of internal coherence, doesn't she? Which, yeah, Truth Drugs might be a step beyond.
Also on Instagram, Hayley A77. Thank you, Hayley A77, for listening. Said very lovely things about the podcast. Particularly picked up on a point we've made a few times, I think, especially in rock and roll, but elsewhere as well, that the 60s weren't swinging for everybody. And we were talking about the Sound of Music soundtrack being the biggest smash hit musical success of the decade. But that's very traditional Rodgers and Hammerstein. That's not the Beatles. That's not the Rolling Stone. And that reminded Hayley of a documentary that she'd seen about Mrs. Mills, who was a similar age to Agatha Christie, who had top 20 singles and albums during the 60s, and apparently released almost 40 albums, which were recorded at Abbey Road, obviously famous for the Beatles, between 1961 and 76. So was prolific, just like Christie was prolific in her writing. So Mrs. Mills was.
I didn't
in
know
her
about
music.
Mrs. Mills. That's
I
an
didn't
interesting
know about
little.
Mrs. Mills.
But this is why it's so lovely that people are coming to us with these facts that like I say, that's completely news to me. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Hayley.
And then we had an email from Jules Burt. Hi, Jules.
Hello, Jules.
Who, when we called out for sort of ideas for expansion, sort of hit upon something we're already thinking, actually. He said, how about a segment in this show talking about Christie's UK 60s paperback output? It might be quite interesting, as they weren't all published by Fontana, but also Pan and Penguin published her in that decade. I would suggest that Christie had a superb literary agent who got the three publishers working against each other, trying to outdo the competition. Admittedly, this was even more pronounced in the 50s. An interesting subject, I think. It's funny you should say that, Jules. I think what we'll probably do is a talk at some point, because it's inherently visual. I think that's probably the path we'll go down. But yes, we have put a pin in that. And it's worth saying that David Morris, Collecting Christie, his excellent blog, he's so comprehensive of his coverage of all the different editions, all the different covers. So whenever I'm looking for 60s covers, that's where I go. So yeah, there's lots out there. But a very good point, and we will, put a pin in that, Jules, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Jules. Okay, what's next from the mailbag? Thank you. This one's via the website.
Oh, yes.
I don't know how that ended up on paper.
I printed it out.
Oh, yes, cool. So this is from Nick Cardillo. So Nick emailed us, I think, a really good point about Christie in context with other writers. Something I find particularly interesting is the way in which Christie's work in the 60s still feels a piece of what she was writing in the 30s and 40s, not unduly influenced by the new breed of mystery writers who emerged in post-Second World War England. Christie was one of her few contemporaries to maintain the puzzle tradition of mystery writing. When you compare her later output with that of the other surviving crime queens, Marjorie Allingham and Ngaio Marsh, one sees that Allingham's 50s and 60s outputs are a lot closer to thrillers and adventure than pure detective stories, and while Marsh would continue to chronicle the exploits of Roderick Allen and co. into the 80s, her books were always less puzzle-driven than Christie's. So that's really good. I mean, that's the sort of thing that's so helpful for us, someone who has obviously read really widely and helps us to make these connections. Because as I'd said, I've read my fair share of Marsh and Sayers and so on, but I certainly don't know them anything like as well as Christie. So thank you, Nick. Nick also did say, as an aside, after hearing at the end of your rock and roll episode, should I, an outspoken Ngaio Marsh fan, brace myself for some Marsh backlash in coming installments? I can assure you, Nick, don't worry. Actually, I really enjoyed reading Ngaio Marsh's.
So I replied asking for recommendations. I reassured Nick that there is no backlash. I've just never read her, and Nick actually, as the connoisseur of Marsh that he is, he recommended, this might be of use to the listener, he recommended Overture to Death,
which I've just read, and Kemper's just done a special episode for over at All About Agatha.
Oh, very good. So, on Patreon. Death and the Dancing Footman, Final Curtain, and then he also kind of gave honourable mentions to Opening Night and Night at the Vulcan.
Oh, interesting. I've only one of those is ones that I've read. So,
well, there you go.
There we go.
Nick actually sent us a follow-up email about a subject that we have future designs on. So yeah, we're putting a pin in something else, something to do with Christian TV. But yeah, thanks for getting in touch, Nick. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Nick. Oh, it's a long one.
I'm picturing one of those ones that like unfolds down to the...
it's a scroll.
Yeah. So Christopher Deal emailed us. It was very kind. Thank you, Chris. He said, congratulations on a fantastic podcast. I love the idea of looking at Christie through the lens of the 1960s. I wholly agree that the 60s output is underrated. He also said, I have a theory about the queer house-proud character in A Caribbean Mystery. This is who is to be looking after Marple's house while she's away, a friend of Raymond's.
Yes, right.
Mark lamented that we never meet him in the book, but could he possibly be Horace Bindler from Greenshaw's Folly? I admit that I don't have that story in front of me, so I could be remembering it wrong, but Horace came off pretty queer to me when I read the story, and since he's Raymond's friend who likes houses, ... maybe.
I like that.
I like it too.
Really like that.
It's such a, again, it's so great having this insight from people. I never made that connection.
Because I also can imagine that even if Christie weren't making that connection, she would be thinking those are the sorts of people that are in Raymond West's world.
Of course, because he's in the literary intelligentsia. And
it doesn't have to be the same person, although I love the idea it is, and I'll absolutely sign up to that.
Yeah. He also said, by the way, Gray, my English teacher in high school assigned us to pick an author, read at least 3 of their books and write a paper on them. As soon as she assigned it, she mentioned some authors that she would not allow because they were not literary, and the first author she said was Agatha Christie. This is in response to the fact that I was not allowed to write about Poirot and Hastings being gay when I was at A-level.
That lasting trauma that has got us to this point.
I know.
It has propelled you. Yeah, so
thank you, AQA. Otherwise we wouldn't be here right now. But yes, he also, because Chris is full of great ideas, not content to just that gem. I replied, and he followed up again saying, I wanted to also thank you for being a Bertram's apologist / supporter, and for your history of the 1963 train robbery that I'm embarrassed to say I knew next to nothing about. I've always enjoyed Bertram's Hotel, and that bit of history really makes me appreciate it even more. I was really pleased. That's been a pet theory of mine, the Great Train Robbery and Bertram's Hotel, that I've been nursing for many years. So I was really pleased that people have responded well to that. I then coined the term Bertrologizing, which Chris ran with, and I think this is something that we should get trending, frankly.
What's the actual definition of Bertrologizing?
Feeling like you should apologise for your love of Bertram's, and I'm here to tell you must not feel shame, and you must not Bertrologize.
Agreed. I'll sign up to that.
You're a Bertrologist. Chris followed up, I recently also reread Third Girl, and in some ways that novel and Bertram seem to be 2 sides of the same coin. I thought this was really interesting, and again, something that hadn't occurred to me at all. He says, Bertram's is about the old London, but then it turns out that that's all a facade, and it has a climax that is like nothing we've read in a Marple novel before. Third Girl, following it, is all about swinging London and a plot that seems to be very modern, only for the solution to be actually surprisingly old school classic Christie. And I think I replied saying this, I love this idea of yours about Bertram's Third Girl being almost a yin and yang. I'm constantly reacting against and developing on the last project I write with the next one, so I can definitely believe that that's something that Christie would do as well. I think you do sort of vacillate. But yes, big thanks to Chris, and very much looking forward to meeting him at the festival.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah, here we go. Oh.
You don't have to be surprised by it every time. You're like,
I'm acting.
As if you...
I'm acting.
Is this what you call it? Acting? Wow.
An Insta message from Mrs. P. Thank you, Mrs. P, who sent us a couple of lovely messages.
Thank you.
Again, nicely detailed. So I love that people are really thinking about what we're saying and adding and contributing.
Yeah.
So Mrs. P's first message was about Endless Night, and we'd mentioned about money and tax, especially with Mike.
This was in response to us. It was us agreeing with All About Agatha on the point that one of the few points at which Mike doesn't feel like a convincingly working class person is when he...
At least if he doesn't earn so much money, he doesn't have to pay so much tax.
Yes, yeah. And we said that was maybe a point at which Christie's voice was coming through too strongly there rather than him. But Mrs. P disagrees.
Mrs. P says, and I'm quoting from her direct, perhaps it's my own American take on this, but I feel the attitude of my money is mine, I don't want the government getting its hands on it, is very much an attitude for some working class people, particularly those that lean conservative. It's related to the libertarian philosophy, which has a lot of popularity with certain young men. So I think that's interesting. Thank you, Mrs. P, who also sent us a message after Armageddon.
She did.
Not at the episode, not the event. I should say.
We, the mic, and Mrs. P were the only things that survived the apocalypse.
Yes. We're just doing it for our own entertainment.
Yeah.
Yes. So in response to that episode, Mrs. P, first of all, significantly says finally justice for passenger to Frankfurt. So
wait, get Mrs. P in touch with
Brad.
Get Mrs. P in touch with Brad. Stat. Come on. Let's start a movement.
Mrs. P has adored that book ever since she first picked it up as a young teen. Oh, see? And I think there's a lot about that, isn't it? When you first read it, can be really important to how much you do or don't enjoy it, especially the slightly unusual one. And it's lovely to hear about why Mrs. P particularly likes it and a couple of themes that she picks up in it, saying about how she loves the premise, the anonymity of air travel, the fog, and the scene where Stafford crosses the Hungerford Bridge. The fog, the bumping into the stranger, all of it stuck in my mind so clearly when I first read it that when I went to London to study abroad, I had to reenact that scene. I walked across the bridge and I felt like I too was in a spy novel.
That's brilliant.
Great.
I always reenact the super expensive set piece in The Adventure of the Clapham Cook, the first David Suchet, where there are loads of extras. And every time I go across Battersea Bridge, I think about that.
Yes.
But I've not done it on Hungerford Bridge. I've not thought about Christie on Hungerford Bridge. So there you go.
That's what we'll have to do. One of our meetups one day, we'll have to just be spies.
Yeah.
But that's a really lovely thing from Mrs. P, pointing out that you can get so much pleasure out of these books in different ways when you're reading them in a different way or experiencing a different part of your life. So
yeah,
great. That was really lovely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Yeah. Our dear friend Michelle Casma wrote to us. I've got to say, she's gonna blush hearing this. I am so inspired by how impassioned Michelle is about Christie. Like when she talks about Christie, you just sit up and listen. I think she's fantastic. Like she's been such a supporter of both of our work, hasn't she?
Yes.
And of this project. So yes, a big thank you, Michelle, and thank you for your email. She's also one of the many reasons we love her is she's not going to let us get away with anything, which is brilliant. She said, I've come in with the groceries and have paused fame to send this, which is a bit of a catch-all. Sorry, may have more time later. Loved you both, : and then we're into it. It's just, even the way she writes, you're like, that's so Michelle. I love it. Okay, so first a question. Have you already set up to do a separate post-war, oh no, this is the new normal project on the immediate post-war, i.e. post-Golden Age works? It's funny, she's not the only person that said to us about the legacy of the Second World War, sort of. I think it's very easy to forget, and we did make this point in Armageddon, it's very easy to forget that when Cat Among the Pigeons is published, i.e. our first Swinging Christie's text, the Second World War only finished in Britain and in other places more recently, but in Britain only 14 years before. And that's nothing, 14 years, it's still very much casts a long shadow over these works, and it is definitely something that we're looking to explore. So any more thoughts on that from any of our listeners, we're definitely open to hearing. In an early version of Armageddon, we were going to do more in Armageddon but we ended up focusing that down on the Cold War specifically, because although the Cold War comes very directly out of the back end of the Second World War, it was important for that conversation, I think, to be a bit more self-contained. But yes, the Second World War is absolutely a huge impact on the 60s. The next point is in all capitals. What do you mean there are no Parker Pine fans? Have I ceased to exist? Excellent. Just going to leave that there. She said, I shrieked at your blaming the Cold War on Poirot's inadequate resolution of the Big Four. Definitely a top 5 moment of the pod. Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. A later point she makes is, I somehow marked down that you two have never been to a proper slumber party in the rock and roll episode. I'm assuming this is an invite, Michelle.
Yes, I hope so.
I don't what
Pop to Florida real quick.
I don't know why she'd be bringing it up if not. She also said, which I thought was very kind, in the sex episode, the idea that women's agency is never accidental was brilliant, and you should get a badge on the podcast site just for that, which is very, very kind. She also flagged something which it would be good to give a bit of a disclaimer of, which is that we quoted, and I'm quoting again, obviously, the softly, softly catchy monkey reference. I think it's in pricking, by the pricking of my thumbs. And I didn't actually realise that some people believe that has its origins in racist terminology, that particular saying. Given that we called out the other racist instance in the 60s works, it would be good to caveat that. So yes, again, thanks for bringing that to our attention. The back and forth that we've had with Michelle, though, Michelle is insistent that we've talked about Mrs. Ramsey and the clocks incorrectly. And she said it twice now, hasn't she? She said it once when we first dropped that sex episode. And then I said, I think go back and listen to it because I think I maybe edited around it. But I think we agree on the interpretation of the passage. And then she went again saying, I still don't think you're getting it right. So this is Mrs. Ramsey saying... So she's read in an article. We've got the passage up in front of us, listener, just to really give Michelle her due. So she reads in a magazine, only 6 happy days in the year for a woman, right? Mm-hmm. She says the first and the last days of the holidays. And the point she's making is that she's looking forward to spending the time with the kids in the holidays when the holidays start. But then the punchline at the end of the paragraph is, I can hardly believe they'll be back at school soon. I can't wait. And the joke being she will also look forward to seeing the back of them.
Yes. I think we are in complete agreement about this.
Michelle, do write in again if I'm not getting it, because I'm... It's all in good fun. She's such a supporter, and it's been really interesting to back and forth with her. Big thanks, Michelle, and see you soon.
Oh, and another. This is an email from listener Alan Burns. Thank you, Alan, for emailing in.
Hi, Alan.
Who has raised some things that, once again...
Most importantly, he raises the fact that he's a Pet Shop Boys fan.
That's just what I was about to say.
As fellow big Pet Shop Boys fans, we were thrilled to hear it.
Oh, yeah. Well, also, that was the point I discovered that you're a Pet Shop Boys fan. I didn't know that you were.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm sure I've said it before, but you've got a bad memory.
Oh, famously.
The joke is that... Oh, we've said it on the podcast before that I've got a terrible memory.
Do you remember that?
But I forgot!
Whoa!
Boom, boom.
So, Alan... very kindly emailed to say that he was sorry to miss me in Belfast, because I went to Belfast to give a chat at their festival, which was lovely. I'd never been to Belfast before. So nice. I hope they invite me back, because it was such a great event. But we forgive Alan for not coming, because he was going to see Pet Shop Boys instead.
Yeah, that absolutely. Of all the excuses, that is a valid one.
We will absolutely allow that. Pet Shop Boys or Diana Ross, both of those are allowed as reasons.
Both of those are alive.
Yeah. But what Alan did mention as a potential topic for discussion was about the way that Christie treats holidays, because he said about how she opens the decade with the Adventures of Christmas Pudding and then sort of closes it with Halloween Party. So Alan says how Christie had previously centred the plot of some of her books around Christian holidays, such as Easter in Dumb Witness and obviously Christmas and Hercule Poirot's Christmas. But Alan feels it's really the 1960s, and I think he's right here, that both traditional holidays, such as Christmas and Halloween, and travel become central to a lot of the stories. Not just in Adventure with Christmas Pudding and Halloween Party, Star Over Bethlehem, which you've still got so much to say about.
The little naughty donkey.
The naughty donkey. So, as we said before, we are going to do specials focusing on Christmas and Halloween. So this would be a really good point to flag up that we'd love to hear if our listeners particularly have any memories of Halloween and Christmas in the 60s.
Yeah.
I've already, I don't know, Mum, don't listen. I don't want to say that I've given away your age, but I've already spoken to my mum about things like Halloween. So if you have any particular memories, perhaps about whether you read stuff in Agatha Christie that you think, oh, that's just what it was like, or no, that was too old-fashioned, or that feels quite forward-thinking for the 60s.
Yeah.
So we'd love to hear from you. So thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Alan.
Teed us up really nicely.
Most importantly, though, he says, P.S. keep swinging is a great catchphrase.
Keep swinging.
So there you go. Sorry if we didn't get time to read out your message for us, but we love hearing from everyone. Please keep them coming, and thank you everyone for listening.
Yes, thank you.
Shall I pack the mailbag away?
Pack it away for another
That's
year.
It. Hold on.
So do stay tuned and subscribed for our bonus episodes. They may drop without warning, like an atom bomb.
Might they?
Yes.
Oh.
We've got tricks up our sleeve.
We do.
So lots of surprises in store.
Yes, and specifically, we'd love to hear anything and everything that anyone wants to share really about the 60s, about the 60s Christies specifically. Like we said, memories of the time in terms of Halloween and Christmas in particular would be lovely.
Yes,
I also love seeing when people have picked up either for the first time or returned to swinging titles, like, getting these pictures of someone reading Cat Among the Pigeons for the first time in years in wherever they're reading it. I just think that's thrilling. So yes, do keep up with that. And again, any topics or themes that you'd like to see us cover off in our future episodes, we've got many planned, but many more that are sort of floating. So we're always looking for inspiration, I guess.
Yes, and please do rate and review us wherever you are listening to us. That really helps us, and they're always lovely to see. And indeed, recommend to your friends if you've got Christie friends who aren't online, aren't perpetually online, if they're lucky enough to not be perpetually online. Do let people know that they might be interested, perhaps.
Tell everyone. I think lean out the window, shout it. I think tell your postie.
I'm hoping for skywriting, like the very least, like Mr.
And how might they get in touch with us, Mark?
Well, it's a good job you ask. Via X and Instagram at Christie_time. You can email us at theswingingchristies@gmail.com. You can contact us through our website at christietime.com, which has also got lots of extra resources and also is where we post details of any upcoming events.
Yep.
You can find us individually on X, Grays at classic_Graham, and I'm at Dr. Mark Aldridge. I'm also on Insta at that same @.
And you can find links to Mark's books, Agatha Christie on Screen, Agatha Christie's Poirot, The Greatest Detective in the World, and The Star, the new one, Agatha Christie's Marple, Expert on Wickedness, coming soon.
Yes, thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Keep
Bye.
swinging.
Keep swinging. Thanks for listening. The Swinging Christies is a Christie Time project by Dr. Mark Aldridge and Gray Robert Brown. This episode was recorded on the 20th of July 2024. Our artwork was designed by Bartlett Studio and our music is by Dar Golan. Coda.
Oh.
Do you remember?
I remember, and then I keep forgetting, and then I keep thinking, I wonder if Gray will remember. Oh!
It's been crushed at the bottom of my back. So basically, dear listener, I don't know if you recall, at the end of the intro episode, Mark gave me a little gift, and it was a very, very swinging edition of The Clocks, which somebody else sent us a picture of recently, didn't they?
Yes, they did, yes.
Because it's a book club edition,
it's a book club edition,
you said. Yeah, with the sort of the woman's face and the clock, and it's very pulpy. And you said your challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to, at the other end of the podcast, give me an equally swinging gift of some description.
Oh, yes, because you did Foley.
Yes, for the Foley. For the Foley.
Oh, first thing to say is that it is in beautiful multicoloured paper. And, oh my God, oh no, that's what it is. I thought that was the wrapping. That's what it is. It is, of course. What else could it be? But it's a pink feather boa. Oh.
It's also because an episode can't go without me mentioning that I'm vegan.
A vegan.
It's also an eco-friendly
good.
feather boa. Oh, that looks stunning. I will take a picture of Mark any minute now and we will be posting that to our socials. But yes, I thought given that we contested how 60s the feather boa is after all, is an ironic purchase. It looks very fetching on you, I must say.
Well, I mean, it always was going to. Neon pink is such my colour.
Yeah, it's that shocking pink that Mitch that's in our artwork.
Yes, of course it is.
It's the swinging pink.
Well, thank you so much.
Happy swinging day, Mark.
Yeah, happy swinging day. Yeah, like I said, not one for the badges. So
Can't keep swinging on the badges.
No, exactly. Not when we're going to pop out in public in a minute.
Honestly, we're just gonna. Yeah. Oh dear. We just want to talk about Aggie.
Yes, yeah. Aggies. Thank you.
I'll take a picture of you now.
Oh God, how red am I?